Handsome Hockey Podcast. 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 Handsome Hockey Podcast.
Handsome Hockey Podcast.
Okay, everybody. Welcome to episode 40 of the Handsome Hockey Podcast. We are now over the hill.
We have got a gas-powered leaf blower, and we use it every day.
Regardless of the amount of leaves on the ground. Mostly it's just to annoy children as they pass by.
Exactly.
I am Jake. With me, as always, is...
Evan.
You're screwing it up.
Evan.
I don't like it.
I gotta mess with you somehow.
I know this is all just to fuck with my head. We have a lot to cover today.
So much.
Unfortunately, and fortunately, it's all hockey. As much as we love doing the episodes where we dive deep on the cultural issues with the hockey world, we're okay not covering the Chicago Blackhawks sexual assault case for 1 week.
I mean, we do take a sharp turn into sexual misconduct here.
Yeah,
Are you forgetting that part?
At one point, yes.
Okay.
However,
it won't be a huge focus of this
it
episode.
won't be Chicago related, which is nice, unless he's drafted by them. And
oof. That would be a big oof. Just turn oof to the maximum if that happens. These
episodes are fun because we just get to make jokes. And it's very difficult to have a tasteful joke in a discussion of sexual assault, to the point where I'm afraid of even trying. And
Stan Bowman just says, I know why you want to hate me. I'm just going to double down.
Oh, God. I don't know if I would be able to contain my vulgarities next week if that happens.
That sounds like a recipe for success, really.
Yeah. Our listeners might enjoy this, but
we would not.
We would not. So we're going to dive right in today. Some quick hitters from the last week. The Stanley Cup had some damage.
It took a quick hit.
Probably Curtis. Yes. Oh.
The Bolts did a good job partying and dented the cup.
If you had to guess which player dented it, which one would you say?
Totally Tyler Johnson.
I'm going with Pat Maroon for sure.
I know. Yeah. And
all the pictures of the dented cup are being held by Pat Maroon. And then previously there's video of him taking it on a jet ski. And I was like, there it is. Right. I
think he came out and said, I dented the cup. Although I think he was like, we weren't even doing anything dumb with it. I was holding it and slipped on something.
The best part about this is it has to go to Montreal to get fixed.
That's epically hilarious.
The just beautiful chef's kiss irony in the fact that it's finally going to Montreal.
Something that Tampa has been doing with the cup that is pretty cool is giving some time with it to players from last year's cup winning team because they weren't able to during COVID. But now that the cup has been injured, I imagine that they send a Mounties SEAL Team 6 extraction team to rescue the cup.
The Senators hired Pierre Maguire to be head of player. I can't even get the whole sentence out without saying why.
Well, I'll tell you why, Doc. It's because this guy here, when we was on the Saginaw Sting and he had his third breakfast with the team, I saw him take 3 sausage links and Ted it 2. And, I knew right then he was going to be a good player, Doc.
That's how you know he's a go-getter. So Pierre Maguire sucks. And we're thrilled that he is no longer going to be broadcasting hockey. The thing about this is there was starting to be good vibes around the Senators. They have a huge prospect pool. Pierre Dorian is a pretty solid GM and somehow manages to field a team and build a team despite having the worst owner in North American sports.
Right. And the vibe around this was he didn't know about this until I found out in the news. And this was 100% a Eugene Melnick thing. I'm willing to sort of give Pierre a chance because he's been the first person to say, I haven't been employed by a team in 20 years. I'm going to kind of go in with my eyes open. And maybe his, encyclopedic knowledge will be helpful in some respects. I mean, I'm hearing that he's going to be a bit of a PR person as well as this player development talking head. So I think maybe it ends up being a little bit more of a hybrid role
There was a lot of talk that he was going to be engaged in many decisions within the team, not just player development, and that is terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, some people are like, did he just hire Dorian's replacement?
We need to strike a trade, guys. Okay, well, what do you have in mind? We really need to bring in TJ Oshie because he's from War Road, and that's really important.
You know, he could bring in worse players.
TJ Oshie actually isn't from War Road. I think I'm the one who thinks he's from War Road, and he's actually from Washington somewhere.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But like every time he brings up War Road, I'm just like, shut the fuck up.
I mean, I like, every time Pierre is the man in the box takes you on a verbal geographical tour of backwater Canada, but
yeah, like you just love like these like celestial navigations through like tiny town Alberta where he knows 4 people who dined at the 4th stool of this bed and breakfast in the 1970s, and they all were named Jack and they all played in the NHL. It's like, shut the fuck up. So sad for the Senators. Happy for my eardrums. Pekka Rinne announced his retirement from the NHL. He's 19th all-time in wins, won a Vezina, made a Stanley Cup final. Probably not a Hall of Famer.
In borderline. It's going to be... I mean, the Hall of Fame has kind of a hard time with respect to goalies because goaltending has changed in many ways. And so, I don't know. I kind of think he deserves to get in, but maybe not on the first ballot.
If Chris Osgood can't be in, Pekka Rinne can't be in. And
you're right. I mean,
that's going to piss off a lot of people.
Pekka Rinne never won a cup.
Right.
He came close-ish a couple times. He made a finals. I know. Did they make 2?
I think just 1.
Yeah, I think it was just 1 as well. He terrorized the Blackhawks and backstopped that team to, probably its best stretch in terms of relevant years that it's had as a franchise. So I hope he gets into the Hall. I think it's kind of deserved, but yeah, I think you have a point in that it's probably not super likely.
It is great to see Pekka, go out though. Like he's had an outstanding career and he's in like the Nashville legend. Hopefully he stays around in the community and is able to kind of lead like community efforts for the team and have a role there within the team
and never pay for a meal
ever. Yeah. If Pekka Rinne leaves a restaurant with a tab, what the hell is your problem, Nashville?
It is always eternally funny that, high paid athletes get more free meals from the good graciousness of people's hearts than like the homeless do in many respects. But
yeah, let's feed this millionaire. I know. Elon Musk looks hungry. Miro Heiskanen re-signed or signed a new deal with Dallas. It's a doozy.
Big old deal.
8 years at $8.45 million per.
Damn.
I mean, it's hard to disagree with the deal, to be honest. Like, he's a very good defenseman. He's super young. You're locking him in at that price for his prime. I'm a big fan of the kind of recent move in, giving big contracts to your 23-year-olds or whatever after they come off their entry-level deal, because then you're locking them up for their prime. And when they're 31, they can go somewhere else. And like, is 8 years a lot of term? Yeah, sure. But if that's what you have to do.
And he's probably worth about $8 million. I mean, especially given the kind of free agent defense situation now, a lot worse players are going to be making that because defensemen are, they're rare. Good defensemen are rare. And Miro Heiskanen's shown that he can play at a very, very high level at times. So yeah, big contract. Hopefully he plays up to it. One kind of assumes he will, barring injury. He's shown relative consistency, but hopefully he hits the ceiling and that becomes kind of a budget deal for them. That would be kind of cool.
He's making less money than Alex Pietrangelo and is 9 years younger. So like, I think it's a fairly solid deal considering the market. I don't think Dallas is going to have a hard time selling that contract. Florida, we're a big fan of Anthony Duclair.
The Duke.
Yeah. We kind of followed him as he didn't get qualifying offer from Ottawa last year, signed a 1-year show me deal with Florida, had a hard year with some injuries.
Looked great at times.
But looked good, yeah. And so we're thrilled that he's got a 3-year deal with Florida, $3 million a year. That is not anything to sneeze at. And you know, he's young enough that his next deal could, if he plays up to what I think is a very high potential, he could really make a decent amount of money in his next deal too.
Yeah, his problem is really just staying healthy.
I deliberately skipped over this in our quick hitters notes because I wanted to talk about it last. The Portland Winterhawks, our beloved Portland Winterhawks, who not notoriously but famously have used the Chicago Blackhawks logo for the last like 40-ish years or 50-ish years, put out their own branding, their own new logo earlier this week, and it's awesome.
It's a bird.
It's a bird?
Bird is the word.
Considering there is no Winterhawk tribe, as far as I know.
It is an angry bird.
You can throw it at other birds to destroy pigs. It looks great. It's got Mount Hood in the kind of like chest tuft of the bird. It's got a couple of feathers in it as an homage to the previous logo.
I'm hoping that they go with a stitched on logo like they had, because that would give the jersey kind of a consistent feel, and they've kept the jerseys relatively the same.
Anyway,
but yeah, it's good that you know, we have one less Indigenous logo in the league or in hockey, and you know, it's good for them to go out and get a fresh design, a new start, and I'm glad to see this. And this definitely puts Chicago on notice as the last major Native American logo remaining in hockey and most of pro sports at this point. One kind of cynical thought is maybe now that they're caught up in this sexual harassment scandal, they could change the logo just to deflect from that.
Yeah, I do appreciate that the Winterhawks, instead of, you know, just throwing something together, they went out and hired relatively famous people. Brian Gundell did the artwork for the new logo. Really cool that they did this. It's needed to happen for a long time. Their attempts to have like quasi different logos in the past were really atrocious. So I'm really glad that this one came out and is awesome. Yeah, it's super cool. We're proud of our local WHL franchise and are excited to be able to actually go see some games this year and you know, and watch the Winterhawks in their, you know, final advanced form. It's like the Mechazord coming together.
Charizard.
With that, there's some big to-dos coming up this week in the NHL. We figured we were just going to stuff it all into one happy little package, which is like what I call my order from Panda Express.
One happy little package, please.
One happy little package, please.
Yeah, there's a lot going on this week. So on Wednesday, we get the expansion draft. Before that, we've just entered into a freeze on all of the other transactions in the league while Seattle is kind of deciding. And 1 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, that freeze stops. And after the expansion draft, then teams can start dealing with the fallout. Is that?
And then the draft starts.
Oh, yeah. And then we have the draft, the amateur draft. Like, now you have to specify what draft is what this year.
For the last time.
Until we have another time.
Oh, God, I hope not. I think we're good. We're good at 32. It's a nice round number. Yeah, there have been some crazy moves made in the last week or so.
Especially in the last like 48 hours.
Yeah, as teams try and get something for players that they might lose in the expansion draft, they have kind of just been able to ship some contracts, get some draft picks, or get other players in response. I think maybe the most surprising on like wow, this is really stupid kind of way is the Chicago Blackhawks traded Duncan Keith to Edmonton for Caleb Jones and a 3rd round pick,
which can become a 2nd round pick technically with a bunch of modifiers that won't ever happen.
Yes, that would require Edmonton to do something in the playoffs.
Go to the 3rd round of the playoffs, and then Duncan Keith has to play like
your 4th most minutes.
Yeah, which, you know, technically possible, highly improbable. Yes. This is an amazing trade for the Blackhawks. Like, Duncan Keith was definitely in the decline this year and is getting paid $5.5 million. sad to see him go, but happy that he's going to be closer to his son and he's going to a place where he obviously will be valued. It's a bittersweet goodbye.
Well, at least by Ken Holland. Ken Holland's press conference or like Q&A after this happened was the most prickly, like get off my lawn moment I've seen in the NHL. And in a sport full of prickly get off my lawn moments, this was the worst.
Was that the online Q&A where they had to like cut out comments because people were just roasting him so hard?
Well, there was like they asked him like what do you think about what you gave up to get Duncan Keith? And he was like, well, I couldn't get him for free, could I?
And like, well, actually, you probably could
have gotten him for probably much less than you gave up.
Insane that Chicago retained no salary in the trade and got, maybe an actual player back.
They protected Caleb Jones. Like,
right.
They obviously think a lot of him.
And not a crappy draft pick. Like,
no. If this is the last gift that Stan Bowman gives to the Chicago Blackhawks before he's fired, like, good for you.
Sure.
But I understand it on some level. Like, the Oilers organization, Ken Holland is worried about not having kind of a winning mentality. He's worried about not having guys there who have quote unquote done it before. So like there is actual, upside to bringing in a Duncan Keith.
Right. Who has won things as a star player.
It's not that Duncan Keith going to Edmonton is bad. What's bad is they're paying him $5.5 million a year for a guy who's by all advanced metrics was awful last year.
Yeah, he's like 1 or 2% wins above replacement.
Yeah. He's not a good player anymore.
No.
And
the tape shows it too.
Yeah, like the eye test shows it, all the analytics show it.
Also, he fell and put his head into a linesman's knee and gave himself a concussion, and that's what ended his season.
And which was maybe for the best for Chicago, I don't know. Ken Holland is terrible at his job. He's absolutely terrible at his job. The only thing I think that he's done that was okay in Edmonton thus far was the Tyson Barrie deal.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how he fits in this team. I mean, Duncan Keith's game is kind of unique. Maybe he can be more relevant this year than he has been in years past, but
maybe by not playing 23 minutes a game.
Right, yeah, maybe a second pairing guy. I mean, that would maybe be a huge victory for them. Second pairing guy and a power play guy, like that could be cool, but we'll see.
The moral of the story is Ken Holland is stupid and bad at his job.
Speaking of head scratcher deals, Zach Parise and Ryan Suter got bought out by the Minnesota Wild. Two very expensive and long-term contracts that were handed out by the previous regime to hometown guys. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because it doesn't really save them much, if any, money. It saves them money this year, but then they're in the red for at least a couple $1 million delta for many years, and that's going to be, into Kaprizov's prime. So that's going to hurt your ability to surround him with quality players when these guys were still serviceable. I mean, Parise was turning into a middle six, kind of bottom six guy, but
was healthy scratched most of the latter part of the season.
But then also when he played, he showed some flashes. I mean, it wasn't like he was a complete, he wasn't a complete ghost. They were healthy scratching him to try and, jumpstart him back. And there's more tread left on Suter's tires for Absolutely. Sure. But
Suter's going to go somewhere for like $1 million a year for like the next 3 years.
Colorado.
And people are going to be irate with whatever team signs him. Florida bought out Keith Yandel. So
too much applause by their fan base.
Yeah, he's kind of in the Duncan Keith mold. Like the game, he's not as good of a player as he used to be anymore. His contract was pretty burdensome.
But last year, playing sheltered minutes, he put up like a wins above replacement of like 75%.
Yeah,
but also he was a power play guy and didn't have to have a bunch of zone starts. They sheltered him very effectively. There's some thought that he could slot into that role pretty seamlessly for a couple other teams, like maybe Boston, who really needs defensemen like that.
Yeah, Boston's going to snag probably one of Yandel or Ryan Suter, I would imagine, on a cheap deal. As long as we're kind of talking about defensemen, Shea Weber is probably not going to play this year due to many injuries.
Yeah, crazy.
What would be super crazy is if he flat out retires, because the cap recapture for him in Nashville is through the roof.
Oh, really? So if he retired, how much would Nashville have to pay up?
If Shea Weber retires, it's almost $8 million a year.
Jesus Christ.
For the rest of his contract.
So they would, they could lose
for Nashville.
Matt Duchene or Ryan Johansson in the expansion draft,
and still
then
not cover it.
And still not and if Shea Weber retires, they would beat out the same amount of salary.
And guess what year that's through?
What?
2025-26.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Isn't it?
That is
kudos to the league for being like, nah, this shit is bullshit. Nah.
Well, and like kudos to Duncan Keith for playing as much of a cap recapture contract as he has. I mean, he's got the backdiving actual money versus his cap number, which I think helps make him attractive to Edmonton in a way.
Sticking with defensemen, I guess, the Bruins re-signed Brandon Carlo to a very healthy career contract. I believe it's $4 million. $4.
Yeah. Good value for him. Unfortunately, he's had a couple head injuries this year, so hopefully he can come back.
He's going to have to stay healthy. But yeah, it's 6 years.
He's not a player.
$1 million.
He's not a player that generally has health issues. He was the victim of a couple of headhunts. One by Tom Wilson, and I forget who hit him poorly, the other guy, to put him out of the playoffs. What kind of complicates things for the Bruins is kind of out of the nowhere, Kevin Miller retired. At 33, he still had some tread left on his tires, or at least they were expecting him to, and he decided he did not. The Bruins have kind of massively mismanaged their blue line situation over the years, letting Chara walk and then, losing Kevin Miller, and Brandon Carlo has been not fully healthy when they've needed him most. So that adds to why we think that Suter or Yandel or any of the other defensive players that are out dangled could end up there and be useful.
Also in defenseman news, Colorado, fearing that they were going to lose him for nothing, shipped Ryan Graves to the New Jersey Devils for Mikhail Maltsev and a second-round pick in this year's draft.
It's a win-win.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Ryan Graves is great. I really enjoy watching his game.
He was also sort of like their worst defenseman in the playoffs.
He was still good. Mm-hmm. Like, the thing about Colorado is they had a bunch of guys who were the same defenseman, like to varying degrees of success.
Right.
They had Devon Taves, Cal McCarr, Samuel Girard, Ryan Graves. Like, they just had a lot of guys who were similar players. I really like Ryan Graves. I think it's a great pickup for the Devils.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think they've got Bowen Byram just coming up. Like,
right,
Colorado's fine.
Yeah, Graves almost makes more sense as a Devil than he does as an Avalanche player. And the Avalanche, Joe Sakic was very smart to flip a player that was probably going to get taken in the expansion draft for real estate. So, that smart play.
Now they have a second round pick this year, so that's good for them. They didn't before. They get the Islanders second round pick from this year, not the Devils, which is probably not surprising just because the Devils pick is going to be really good.
Yeah, so the lower of the two picks.
Yes. Also in defensemen, you mentioned this earlier, Nick Leddy was shipped from the Islanders to the Detroit Red Wings for Richard Panik and a second round pick.
With salary retained.
The Wings also retained 50% of Richard Panik's salary, which is like $1.5 million. It's not like, or $1.25 million, something
chump
like that.
Change.
Especially when you've got $48 million in cap space. So I'm confused by this trade. It makes sense on a lot of levels because, Nick Leddy is coming in. So is Mort Seider. You want somebody to kind of shelter and also like take Mort Seider and Philip Hronek, under their wing. So it's cool to have a still very solid NHL defenseman who's been there, who's done that. He's won a cup. He's played in the last two conference finals. It's a good move. It's a good hockey move in that sense. We also are very short on left-sided defensemen.
Yeah, I was going to say the handedness in this kind of plays in more than it usually does. And one wonders if maybe, he's another flip for Stevie Y.
That's the thing. Giving up a second round draft pick for a guy that a team want or kind of needed to get rid of or was going to possibly lose anyways. That's the part that doesn't make sense. And like a second round pick when you are a rebuilding team is a substantial piece to give up.
They also have a ton of them.
Yeah, true. But like still, like you could have packaged two of those picks to move up and grab somebody, like whatever. It reduces your flexibility in this draft. And especially for a guy who's 30 and is on the last year of his deal.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that this mostly makes sense to me, this is how I'm making sense of it and not being kind of like, not dumbfounded, but somewhere around there by this trade is the Red Wings trade him for a first round pick. He has a great year. He plays a ton of minutes in all situations, has a great year, and they trade him for a first rounder next year. Even if they get a second round pick back for him next year, you got a year out of Nick Leddy who, as I said earlier, can absolutely mentor your young guys. And we have a ton of young guys in the back line.
Dallas has exposed Ben Bishop, who will waive his no-move clause for the expansion draft. He has not been healthy, and one wonders if he will ever be healthy. So kind of guessing that, he's just one of these goalies that are getting kind of left out like flags in the breeze because they're tattered enough that nobody wants their services.
Also in goalie news, the Sharks sent a second-round pick to the Coyotes for Aiden Hill.
Why?
Yes.
Like, did the Sharks want to be bad?
The Sharks are the dumbest team in the NHL right now, right?
They might be.
It makes me so happy.
It's hard to argue that Edmonton is better than them, but they might
Ken
be.
Holland factor looms large.
But they might be. I mean, all those just ancient men on incredibly expensive contracts, like.
Let's the rest of these are kind of rapid fire type things. So let's just kind of breeze through them because we got a lot of shit to talk about.
Andrew Ladd heading to Arizona from the Islanders for a 2021 second round pick, 2022 second round pick, and 2023 third round pick just to take his contract. So, Andrew Ladd, who has been playing in the AHL for many years.
And loving it.
Unfortunately for him, he's going to be expected to probably play some NHL minutes again this year.
Maybe.
His $5 million cap hit is insane for a player that doesn't play in the NHL. We'll see how that goes.
The best part was there's a contingency in that contract where third round pick is transferred if Andrew Ladd plays one game in the 2022-2023 season. So if he plays one game for Arizona next year, they get a third round pick.
So basically you have signed this man's NHL death warrant. Like he will play in the NHL this year and then never again.
All he has to do is play the first game of the year. They call him up and they're like, gotcha, third round pick. Suck it, Islanders. And then he goes back to the minors and lives it up again. What else have we not talked about?
Nolan Patrick and Philippe Myers were sent from the Flyers to Nashville for Ryan Ellis. And then Nashville then flipped forever Nashville legend Nolan Patrick to Vegas for Cody Glass. This is a big trade and maybe the biggest one of the day in that all of these are real hockey players. And, Cody Glass has a lot of potential. Nolan Patrick has a lot of potential. They just haven't been living up to it. And Ryan Ellis is probably a top
15 defenseman in the league.
I was going to say top 10.
Probably.
This is a win-win-win for everybody. And a quadruple win if you count all of the jokes made on social media by Nashville about Predators legend Nolan Patrick. I saw
Nashville actually had jokes. That's
new. They had some good jokes. I saw one. It was they photoshopped his head onto some Callie Yarncrocs body or something, and then wrote thank you in Microsoft Paint scripts. Like, it was perfect. That was a good one.
It's new that Nashville has a sense of humor about things, so that's good. I'm most thrilled, actually, for Cody Glass to kind of get a fresh start.
Same here.
He's a winter hawk. I definitely saw him a number of times when he played out here.
Yeah, it was like he was the guy that we would go see and be like, this guy's going to be good.
That fucking guy.
Yeah, he absolutely stood out on the ice.
Yeah, so heading to Nashville, hopefully they can give him some minutes and give him a fresh start, and he can make an impact because he's a very skilled hockey player, and hopefully he can show it in Nashville where he wasn't able to in Vegas.
Yeah, and you never knew why he wasn't really playing in Vegas. Like maybe he kicked an assistant coach's dog or something.
It wasn't because of center depth. All right, 2 more, and then we're gonna head into more. This is all a build up to our expansion draft kind of brouhaha. Barclay Goodrow's negotiation rights were transferred to the New York Rangers for a 7th round pick. Okay. I think Barclay Goodrow is a hell of a player. Mm-hmm. You could make the argument that him and Blake Coleman moving to Tampa were the 2 most important moves they made in the last 3 years.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I'm excited for him to be in New York. That's cool. Be in the Big Apple, play for the Rangers, but also he'll hopefully have a fairly sizable contract, somewhere in the 3 to 4 million range, and
he's kind of a player that they kind of need, the physical guy.
Since the Rangers were single-handedly beaten up by just Tom Wilson last year, I think it's good for them to have somebody with some grit. Barclay Goodrow's not a quote unquote fighter, but he's got grit. He's got sandpaper, but he's also a skilled guy. Mm-hmm. And put him on your second line to protect whomever, or put him on your third line and let him flourish. It's a good sign or a good trade. And then finally, the Vancouver Canucks traded a 3rd round pick to Dallas for the negotiation rights with Jason Dickinson, who was for a long time, one of the top prospects in the Dallas organization. He played quite a bit this year, did very well. He's got limited offensive upside, but he's a very good defensive center, kind of like a cheaper Philip Deneau sort of thing. Okay. So, and probably not as good at it as Philip Deneau, but still.
So this is a good move for Vancouver because while everyone is expecting their GM to do very dumb things, he kind of stood pat and allowed other GMs to pass Jim Benning on the stupid GM power ranking list.
I don't know if any of the moves that were made by bad GMs were GMs that were above Jim Benning on the bad GM list that slipped below him now.
That would be a interesting. We should
Ken Holland and Ron Wilson, they were already way down there. Maybe giving up a 3rd was a bit of a lot for a guy who you're just getting the negotiation rights for, and you also just exposed in the expansion draft.
That's a little crazy.
I would think a 5th, maybe. He's a player with upside, 4th at the most. Again, I am just making shit up because I'm not a GM. I think that's a hefty price to pay for a guy who you might not be able to sign. All right, so this morning, the expansion draft list, the protected list, came out at 8 a.m. Eastern time. So by the time I woke up, Twitter was already a flurry. We're going to use capfriendly.com's Seattle expansion draft tool, which if you've never been to capfriendly.com, it's one of my favorite websites in the world because I get to see how stupid the Sharks are in numbers and on my screen as opposed to just talking about it. If you want to see how stupid your team is, go to capfriendly.com and check out all of their metrics. If you're just kind of nerdy about cap space and things like that, like I am, I don't do numbers at all, but I do cap space, so it's fun.
I think it's funny that it does kind of exist for one of the best reasons it exists is sort of Schadenfreude, for empirical evidence of stupidity.
Yeah, it's great. It makes me happy whenever I look at the Red Wings page and I realize that they have only one contract on the team for 2 years from now.
Where's the rest of the team?
It's a complete reset. Yzerman is a fucking genius. Anyways, so we're going to dive in using Cap Friendly's expansion draft tool. It's, again, www.capfriendly.com. Check it out if you are in any way interested in this sort of thing. So Evan and I both selected a team from using that Cap Friendly tool, and Evan, I think you made kind of the more reasonable decisions.
My financials in the back end don't quite make a whole lot of sense, but I also took some of the expensive star players and probably took budget players that are a little bit too expensive for me. I'm to a point where I probably have to go back and revise it if I was actually the GM, but thankfully I'm not.
My team is as much chaos as I could possibly choose. I think what we're going to do is just kind of go through our teams and just make fun of them effectively. Just to get this out of the way at the beginning, the projected cap hit for 2021 for my team is $56 million.
Okay.
With 25 in cap space, but I also have 10 RFAs or 10 free agents to re-sign with that $25 million this year.
Gotcha. So my projected cap hit is $70 million, and then I have $11 million left to negotiate.
We both probably have a little bit of work to do in this. But guess what? We're not real GMs. We just play one on TV. Starting off first, Anaheim would be the first team up. Who did you take?
I went with Hayden Fleury, young defenseman. He's got term. He's pretty good. That's I think a pretty obvious choice.
It's so obvious that I made the same choice.
He's got a good pedigree. Came over from Carolina in a trade last year. They were kind of stupid not to protect him, in my opinion.
They also had Shattenkirk available, which was kind of surprising.
Interesting, but his cap hit is like 3 times Hayden Fleury's, and he's 7 years older, so
I mean, I could honestly see Shattenkirk being the guy that becomes like a veteran, that early veteran presence in Seattle. But yeah, for just the sake of both making the numbers work and building a team, I went with Hayden Fleury as well. Yeah,
and I could see Adam Henrique going in this slot too. Another veteran presence, pretty solid goal scorer in his own right, but we'll see.
Yeah. Arizona, I went with Michael Bunting.
The good Michael Bunting.
Yes. My team chaos wants to bring some kind of snarl, and Michael Bunting is a player that produced relatively well on a very limited stage last year, and he's only 25, so he might have some upside to explore.
I took Antti Ranta, good goalie. That's kind of it.
When he can be healthy, yeah.
Right. His cap hit at 4.25 is reasonable for a good goalie.
Well, that's what he cost last year. He could probably, I'm guessing, cost less than that in a new contract because he has barely played the last 2 years. He's been hurt so much. So you could probably get him down to like the 2.5-3 mil range, I would think.
This is very true.
For Boston, I took Chris Wagner. He's older, but he's got some of that sandpaper to him. I'm going for mass chaos and a team that's hard to play against.
I took Nick Ritchie for the exact same reasons. And it's kind of funny that you look up and down Boston Bruins roster and it's like, oh yeah, you're 100 grit sandpaper, you're 80 grit sandpaper, you're 60 grit sandpaper. And then you have Taylor Hall at 120 grit finishing sandpaper.
He might be at like 600 grit. It's a sheet of paper.
Yeah.
You just rub it on your face until you get a paper cut.
Yeah, he's actually an exfoliator.
From the Sabres, I chose Tobias Reeder.
Okay.
Buffalo didn't have a lot to choose from. Shocking.
Yeah. I took Colin Miller, but I also probably, if I were to retool, I might go back for Drake Caggiula. I think he's an underrated guy and makes under $1 million a year.
Calgary, I chose Oliver Killington.
Okay.
Young defenseman, hasn't been given like really enough of a chance in Calgary, was a first round pick, hasn't taken the ball and run with it. But whatever you want to, whatever metaphor you want to use for somebody who's underperformed. But maybe a change of scenery, shipping him down to Seattle. He's an RFA, so they'd have to re-sign him, but I think it's a good pick.
If Bill O'Reilly wrote a book about Oliver Killington, it would be called Killing Killington.
God, fucking Bill O'Reilly. My ex's super conservative parents gave me the Killing Patton book, and I was like, motherfucker. I'm gonna read this because I'm a World War II guy. Like Patton is like all World War II, when I was in Switzerland, I peed in the Rhine and then texted my brother and was like, hey, what do me and General George Patton have in common? And my brother was like, fucking nothing. I was like, actually, we both peed in the Rhine. And my brother was like, nice.
So I took Milan Lucic. Just kidding. I took Mark Giordano.
That's a really safe play. Like Giordano is still a very solid defenseman. He'd be a great veteran presence in the locker room. He's a captain in Calgary. He could ostensibly be the captain in Seattle.
From the Carolina Hurricanes, I took Jake Bean.
I did too.
You took Jake Bean. Everybody should take Jake Bean.
Yeah, Jake Bean's going to Seattle.
Congratulations.
You are probably the most obvious pick of all.
As much as I wanted to take Yanni Hakanpää because I love him.
You love Yanni Hakanpää, and I get it. We were just talking about before we came back on the air. What the fuck? While we were on break, about like guys like Nikita Zadorov who just hit everybody but don't do anything else particularly well.
Yanni Hakanpää had a playoff. He was pretty good.
Yeah, but he's definitely one of those guys who just hits a lot of people, and you're just like, oh, okay, fun. For Chicago, I took Malcolm Subban.
I did as well. He's a pretty good, cheap depth goaltender. But there's a lot on the Blackhawks to maybe like or to take. Colorado Avalanche.
The Colorado Avocados, which really should be their mascot, let's be honest.
Yeah, the Colorado Avalanche. This is a definite head scratcher, just who to take from this crew. I mean, you can get any of their star players because they have so damn many star players. Like, I took Jonas Donskoy, you took Jonas Donskoy.
Yeah, it makes the most sense. He's young-ish at 29, and that he's got a couple of years of in his prime still. He's got 2 years left on a reasonable contract. From the players that I chose, he's actually the second most expensive forward that I have on my team.
Well, and also it's interesting looking at this list. Like, how do you not take Gabriel Landeskog if you have the cap space, and if you're willing to make the cap space for a true star player, like? Why not? He's 28-year-old making $5.5 million.
Well, Landeskog was asking for $10 million.
You fucking kidding me? Okay, next.
Free agency. That's why. Landeskog will probably not be picked unless the Kraken want to make a big splash. In which case, more power to him.
Columbus Blue Jackets.
Fuck. Why? Can I just take two people from Colorado?
Yeah, I don't understand. I don't know any of these players.
There's not a single person on this roster who I would be like, that's my guy.
Yeah, I look at like Michael Del Zotto is the name I can remember off of this team.
I think we both chose the same person.
And I mostly remember him because he used to like thirsty text porn stars.
You know who used to do that as well? Our ex-president. I chose Kevin Stenlund.
Because he's a guy?
He's cheap. He's young. He's an RFA after next season. If he comes in and does magical happy things, you can re-sign him. You have control over him. If not, bye now.
Hard to see them taking Max Domi.
If they take Max Domi, I will question everything Ron Francis has ever done. That's like that would be a horrible decision.
Agreed. Dallas Stars. I took Big Rig Jamie Oleksiak. Talk about big and hard to play against. He's a huge man, and he can hit. He's young-ish.
He's got some offensive upside. A little bit. I took him as well. I was creating a team that is hard to play against, and Oleksiak definitely makes them hard to play against.
Imagine if you took like Oleksiak, Nikita Zadorov,
and Yanni Hakanpää.
And you just have
you lead the league in hits by about 400.
Yeah, that was my fantasy hockey strategy this year.
The Red Wings, who did you pick?
I took Troy Stetcher because he's fun and exciting.
I don't want him to leave. I legitimately didn't pick him because I just don't want him to leave.
I know. I picked him because I like him and I like nice things.
Yeah, and yet you do a podcast with me. I took Vladislav Nemesnikov, one, because I didn't want to take Troy Stetcher. I want him to stay in Detroit, but also because I think that's a really solid pickup. He's a very versatile forward who could play on good teams' third line, on a bad team's second line, like the Red Wings, but he can play both wings and center. I think it's a smart pick, and he's relatively cheap next year.
Edmonton, I took Devin Shore. You could probably go with a lot of other of these guys. Tyler Ennis, Dominic Cahoon are both interesting. Kyle Turris is kind of interesting.
I went with Slater Cuckoo.
My man.
Yeah, you're cuckoo for
Cuckoo
Cocoa
for
Puffs.
Cocoa Puffs. Yeah.
I think he's a reasonably talented guy who could, again, fill in that kind of sandpapery back end player type role.
He's still got some room to grow. And also, he is a really awesome interview. He's so good in the media. Also, his sister is actually in the media.
I took a couple of people specifically because of their interview prowess.
Oh, yeah?
He is one of them, yes.
Who else?
We'll get there.
Okay.
I'm guessing you took him as well. The Florida Panthers.
I took notorious mob hitman Frankie the Frank Vetrano.
Okay. I believe I initially took him. I took Ryan Lomberg. Again, whenever you finish a game against my version of Seattle Kraken, you are going to have bruises. And probably your ears will be ringing from getting chirped as well. And Lomberg brings that in spades.
I'm surprised you didn't go with Radko Gudas off of this list.
I fucking hate that guy.
Really?
Yeah, like I appreciate his game, but he's just such a dirty fucking player and I can't deal with it.
I thought you wanted to be hard to play against.
I want to be hard to play against, but I also don't want to hate my team.
From the LA Kings, I took Oli Mata.
I took Oli Mata as well.
There's
big ass defensemen who are going to punish you.
He's 26.
Yeah, he's young. His contract's not bad.
Minnesota Wild. I took Carson Soucy.
Me too.
As a lot of people are thinking that the Kraken will take him. Good young defenseman. Kind of weird that they protected Matt Dumba over him, but I don't know.
The whole reason they got rid of Suter and Parise was so they could protect Dumba.
And it's crazy that
not the whole reason.
Two expansion drafts to protect Dumba, they have lost Eric Holla, Alex Tuck,
and probably Carson Soucy.
That's a lot to pay for Dumba. He's good, but is he that good? I don't know. That's so many good young players to lose.
Two different regimes, too.
Yeah, that's a little crazy. Montreal. Would you take Jonathan Drouin or Philippe Danault?
Neither. Max Chaos. Carey Price.
Fuck yeah.
We're taking Carey Price. We are spending all that money.
I love it.
I have $65.1 million in cap hit for contracts from last year.
And a third of that is goalies.
$10.5 million is Carey Price.
I love it. I mean, they would be stupid to take him, but also it would be so awesome.
It would be the greatest.
It would be Fleury going West 2.0.
Yeah.
Right?
But cheaper somehow. It's Fleury is on the very high end of what I would actually pay a goaltender at 7.5. Carey Price is way over that. They should never ever do this. Never. But just think of the hysteria.
No, I know. It would be cool to see his voice in Seattle because he's an indigenous guy. And I think the kind of, Seattle has a lot of Native American population, a lot of Native American imagery going around in hockey circles and stuff. It would be cool to have, someone like that around.
Well, they also have the Seahawks who, their logo is very indigenous inspired. The Seattle Thunderbirds
and Vancouver.
Yeah. So I think I'm just a fan of chaos.
Yeah.
I am Heath Ledger's Joker in this exercise. But yeah, Carey Price. Who'd you pick?
I picked Brent Kulak, 27-year-old D, makes under $2 million, has term.
That's a sensible choice.
Yeah, interesting on the list is Danault, but he's due a huge new deal.
Next is the Nashville Predators.
Smashville.
Nashville is
an interesting.
They didn't protect a lot of people.
No. Yeah, they've exposed two $8 million a year centers in Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson.
Neither of whom Seattle should pick.
They would be not completely fucking up if they took one of them. But how do you choose between the two other than age? Matt Duchene's 30, Ryan Johansson's 28.
They've both been bad for 2 years now, though.
Yeah, right. Ryan Johansson has arguably been better more recently. And also, if you're going to go with one of them, why not Michael Granlund or Colton Sissons or Cal Yarncroc, who provide a lot of that same value at a fraction of the cost. I went with Eric Holla. I just think he's really good.
I went with Matthew Benning, a cheap-ass defenseman who's young enough and decent.
And $1 million a year and has term.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Now we get into the New York metro area teams.
Yeah, New Jersey was a weird one. I don't know who to pick off of this. I also don't know who half of these guys are.
I picked Andreas Janssen because while I am building a team full of sandpaper and grit who you don't want to play off, you need a little bit of skill.
Yeah, he's good.
And so along with Jonas Donskoy and I think Andreas Janssen and Nemesnikov, you've got some guys who have a decent amount of skill, and we'll get to more of that skill later, another player that I think we both picked. But I think you do have to have some skill. Like you can't just have only guys who will ruin your night. So I picked Janssen.
I went with Will Butcher, a young defenseman who has kind of underperformed to this point in his career, but has all of the upside. He's only 26. He has a fat cap hit though. Like 3.7 for him.
He was my backup choice from New Jersey. I think I really like Will Butcher. I think he had a couple of nice stretches this past year, and if given the opportunity, I think he'll be a very solid NHL player.
He just sort of has like more growing to do, I think, to be a good NHL defenseman. He's like a little too small. He's just a little too wiry, but he's a former Hobie Baker winner.
He might be the guy who turns into the player he's supposed to be at 28, and you're like, oh, Will Butcher, all right. He's like 17th in the Norris voting. Cool.
Right, yeah. If anything we're learning recently, it's like you got to wait on your defensive prospects to really flower.
So the Islanders is another chaos pick for me. Who'd you take?
I took Jordan Eberle. I think, if you're going to get some high-end forward, a $5 or $5.5 million cap hit makes a whole lot more sense than, say, going with Duchesne or Johansson at 8. You could make a whole lot of argument for any of their kind of higher end exposed forwards.
I took Joshua Hosang.
Okay.
Because
awesome.
He's an incredibly skilled guy who isn't being given a chance in the NHL. There's a lot of chatter about that being because he is not white. There's a lot of chatter about that being that he has a shitty attitude. And
he was late for a meeting and then got his chance one year just evaporated. I love it. I think that's great.
I want to give the guy a chance. I think Seattle, what better place to get a new chance than a team who has no history whatsoever. I would love to see Josh Hosang get a chance in the NHL, and we'll see how it goes. I don't foresee it happening, but whatever.
New York Rangers. I took D'Angelo Anthony. Just kidding.
It's almost not funny.
I took Colin Blackwell. He's just a good young center, and had a couple good stretches this year. I think he was almost fantasy relevant for a hot minute.
Team Chaos chose Barclay Goodrow.
Love it.
Because they traded for him and didn't protect him, and so I'm going to snake him. Also, I think Barclay Goodrow is a good player, and so I think this is a really good opportunity for him to get a decent contract and play in Seattle.
What do you think he's actually worth? Because he's an unrestricted free agent, so they have to sign him.
I'm going to say low 3s.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Ottawa, this was another weird one where there was a lot of young talent and a lot of people we have no clue who they are. And also Matt Murray.
That's a big no for me there, Evan.
Who did you take?
I think we both took Chris Tierney.
Is this the second time he's been moved around an expansion draft?
I'm not sure. I wasn't doing a podcast during the last, so I didn't pay as much attention to it. But Chris Tierney, he's a decent NHLer. His contract might be a little high, but we need centers on this team. Peer centers. There's a couple of others that I've theoretically drafted in this exercise that could play center, but Tierney is a peer center, and I think this team needs that.
Completely agree.
Philadelphia, I took Robert Hagg because he is cheap AF.
Okay.
And he's young.
I went a little bit of a chaos pick and a little bit of change of scenery pick, and Shane Gostisbehere here. The kind of enigmatic super talented offensive defenseman maybe could stand to have another change of scenery.
The much maligned Shane Gostisbehere.
God, didn't he win the Calder? Or
I don't remember.
And he was so good as a rookie, and then has not matched that output
At all.
At all.
Yeah. Pittsburgh actually made some interesting decisions, and I took Marcus Pettersson from them because he's 25.
Yeah.
He's got a reasonable cap hit for 4 more years. He's a solid left-handed defenseman. I think, or left side defense, that's an excellent pickup if Seattle goes that route. 4.025 is a great cap hit for a player of that caliber.
I want a little chaos here in Brandon Tanev, basically because I love him, and I love men that stare at ghosts. The
Tanevs are both amazing, and
they really are.
I would really have chosen both of them. Could I have?
Brandon Tanev ended up as like a top 20 fantasy player this year.
Yeah, he's incredible.
I mean, he's a third liner, second liner, maybe.
He's a middle six guy for sure. Yeah, the Sharks, who had to protect all the people you didn't want to draft anyways.
Yeah.
And I think
who do you take from this uninspired group of people?
I think we both chose the most obvious Seattle player.
Who?
Curtis Gabriel.
Yeah. As a more Seattle player, I mean, he's like the West Coast in a hockey player.
Yeah, but Seattle is going to be infinitely more forward thinking than San Jose. I love Curtis Gabriel. I love what he represents. I know that the LGBTQ community can sometimes be torn on him because he's a straight white guy playing hockey who's trying to make that correct impact, but sometimes missteps.
Yeah, and he is still very much learning.
And that's why I would be thrilled to have him. And honestly, he would be one of the people that I would put as the face of my franchise. I think the fact that he can admit that he's still learning and make those mistakes, and just like we are, and he's almost 10 years younger than me, and he's made but for somebody who's willing to put their name, their reputation, their career on the line for LGBTQ plus populations and stick up for them and promote their voices, that's a guy I want on my team. And if he's available and I'm Seattle, I'm taking that guy for sure.
St. Louis Blues.
Max Chaos.
Definitely went Max Chaos. Yeah. Vladimir Tarasenko, I think he's worth the dice roll. He's such a talent, and maybe is finally healed after his 3 shoulder surgeries. That's one of the reasons that he had a falling out with the Blues, is because they mismanaged his surgeries, and he finally got a 3rd surgery that likely fixed him. But it's a big, big gamble. I mean, you could definitely get the injured version of Tarasenko that can't return to his prior form. And, that makes other people on this list interesting. Who'd you take off of Tampa? There's so many good players.
I went with Chaos here too. Ross Colton.
All right.
Yes, I love this man. He is so much fun. So Ross Colton is an RFA after this year. Again, true center, works his balls off on every shift.
Yeah, could he be a future star?
There's a good chance, but he's got some offensive upside.
He's only 24.
Yeah, I think he is a great option there. Okay. Yeah, Yanni, I love Yanni Gourde.
And that's who I picked. I went just straight down the middle, picked Yanni Gourde because he was one of the best players on that team this year as a 29-year-old center.
Yeah, the term and the dollars kind of...
It's a lot.
He's 29 and he's signed for 4 more years at $5 million. Yanni Gourde, like if I took Colton out and put Yanni Gourde on my roster, Yanni Gourde is arguably the 1C on my team.
Can he play 1C?
I don't think so. I think he's a 2C at best. He was I would say the best 3C in the league last year. I think he's probably like a mid-level 2C. Seattle's going to ask a lot of him if they bring him in. But at the same time, I think there's a good chance that he that he thrives in Seattle. He's that kind of player. He's an undrafted guy, so he's always kind of just been I'm going to prove it every shift guy. And if you watch him play, like he's flying like late into games, and you're just like, what? Who is this guy?
Right.
I love Yanni Gourde, and I definitely thought about bringing him in, but I ended up at the last minute going with Ross Colton because I think I love Ross Colton.
Yeah, the other really kind of standout possibility pick here is the Cal Foote, the defenseman, young, 22, son of Adam Foote.
There's also Andre Palat. There's
yeah.
Alex Killorn, Tyler Johnson, a Washington native.
Max Chaos would be picking both Patrick Maroon and Corey Perry because it's like
guaranteed to make the cup and you're guaranteed to win.
Toronto.
I took, again, going for chaos, I took Jared McCann.
Okay.
Again, somebody who can play center. He's young. He's an RFA after next season. He's making just under 3 for this upcoming year. He could also be your 1C based off of this roster. Is he a 1C? No, but he could be on this team. I really like Jared McCann as a player, and he's a little bit flexible. He can play on the left side. He's played on the left side with Sidney Crosby from time to time. But I just like the idea of the fact that Toronto just traded for him and then didn't protect him, and then he's mine. You liked him, I take him.
All your centers belong to us. Vancouver. I took Matthew Highmore, former Blackhawk. He's a really big energy guy. As you were just talking about, he is the guy who is flying late in games. You can always, you always see him taking away other players' time and space, even if he's not putting up a bunch of stats. He's really fast checker. So that's why I went with. Yeah,
I went with Matthew Highmore as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I really like him as a bottom 6 guy.
Well, also he qualifies with term, and also their top end players are dog shit.
Yes.
You want Jay Beagle at $3 million a year?
No,
absolutely not. Sven Bertschy? Nope. Louis Eriksson? Nope. Like,
you could trade Louis Eriksson to me for like 2 first-round picks.
Washington Capitals, speaking of good backups to maybe not backups, I took Vitek Vanacek.
So did I.
He's maybe a future number 1.
Maybe.
Only 25, making under $1 million. Like,
he's an arbitration eligible RFA guy.
Okay.
After this upcoming season. However, he's probably not going to command that much. And if I've already got Carey Price, he's probably not going to play that much. So he might end up being like a $2 million guy for a couple of years. And then you give him some sort of bridge deal. And then once Carey Price's contract is off the books, if he pans out, you sign him.
Who else is attractive off of this list? Like Garnet Hathaway?
No.
It's interesting seeing who gets exposed sometimes because, some of these GMs are like, you could take any one of these guys and we'd be fine. And then some GMs, you can clearly see who is exposed. It's take this one guy and he has like a Vegas parquet of lights around him. And not even pretty please. It was just like, he's good. We can't keep him. Have him.
Have fun. Finally, the Winnipeg Jets.
They've made some very curious decisions.
I took Logan Stanley. Oh, wait, he got protected. I took the much better player in Dylan DeMello.
Yeah, that was so weird.
It's so weird.
I don't understand.
He must be
that move
hated
at all.
in Winnipeg or something. I don't know. Kevin Cheveldayoff he's got a history of kind of weird mishaps. And this, I think, is one of them. If they lose Dylan DeMello in this draft,
people saw this coming.
That's
though.
a real bummer.
People were like, he's going to do something dumb. I took Mason Appleton, young winger with some term. Like, oh well.
So, I mean, we're sitting here kind of like prognosticating based off of your team. What do you think is a possible scenario for them next year?
One last note of the Winnipeg Jets. Laurent Brossoit would be an interesting goalie pick. Yeah. 1.5 at age 28.
Here's my stance on my team, at least. My completely made up random chaos Kraken team. The Pacific sucks. It's bad. Edmonton is going to be Vegas and then Edmonton are the only 2 good teams, and that's kind of a stretch for Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's wide open. And maybe Vancouver bounces back. Maybe Calgary bounces back. LA's been growing the last couple of years. The Ducks suck. The Kings, the Sharks suck. There's Vegas, then a tier below Edmonton, and then nothing but weirdness and question marks. And in that vacuum, I think my Seattle Kraken team could actually make the playoffs. maybe fairly comfortably.
It's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, everyone was saying, don't do what we did with Vegas. And then instead of making side deals that gave Vegas a bunch of great players, instead, there's just a really ton of great players exposed. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, this has to be a bit of a fun shopping list for Ron Francis. I'm just imagining him running around with a shopping cart, putting little like bobbleheads of players in. But
yeah, and so I obviously, like, you and I could have maybe gotten 5 right out of these, like, total. We don't have the slightest idea what Ron Francis is going to do. But
I have a feeling he's not going to take Vladimir Tarasenko.
I have a feeling he's not going to take Carey Price as well. But wouldn't it just be great? Regardless of what the Kraken do this year, so long as they have a relatively stable goaltending situation in that shitty division, I think they can make the playoffs.
Yeah, there's enough goal scoring available in the expansion draft to propel them to the playoffs. It's a question to me, like, what they do at the defense and what they do in goaltender. I think goaltender is really the hardest decision in this whole expansion draft. Like, I ended up with Antti Ranta, Vitek Vanacek, and Malcolm Subban. And you ended up with Carey Price.
Vanacek, Carey Price, and Malcolm Subban.
Yeah. So it's like you pick who you think is going to be your number one out of that, and then get some good depth with potential. Mm-hmm. Was kind of the name of the game. Defense is like anybody's guess. Like, I think if I'm looking at my top, Mark Giordano would be my top D, and then who the fuck to pair with him is the next question. Is like, would Colin Miller be? Yeah, I guess my top pairing would be Colin Miller and Mark Giordano.
I would have Marcus Pettersson. On the left-hand side would be Marcus Pettersson, Jamie Alexiak, and Jake Bean. On the right-hand side, it gets a little dicier. Dylan DeMello, Hayden Fleury, Matthew Benning, Slater Cuckoo can play on the right. It's not a great defensive roster, but it's a okay one.
Yeah, I also kind of fucked up my handedness in that everyone is a lefty because I'm a lefty and I just picked myself over and over again.
Poor form.
But I'm a lefty that plays like on the right. So these aren't actually handedness. It's like where they play.
I think it's a potential playoff team, and, you know, we'll see what happens in the coming days. Literally days. We will get this out just before the expansion draft.
I'm so excited.
So the other bit of business that is coming up here before free agency hits is the actual entry draft. And when we started thinking about how to cover the entry draft, I was like, oh, let's dive deep. Let's look at prospects. And then I thought, that's not really who we are as a podcast.
Yeah, there's also so many good people that do so much good in-depth research all year long into prospects. I mean, I go to Corey Pronman,
Scott Wheeler, Bob McKenzie, Elite Prospects. There's a ton of information out there, and you should probably either subscribe to or read or listen to and just enjoy their work. We're going to do this we're going to call it a mock draft. And
in that we're mocking it.
We're going to make fun of the draft in general. It's completely stupid for us to pretend like we know what we're talking about, so we're not going to. We have compiled lists from all those aforementioned places about whom, you know, are probably the top 10-ish picks in this draft. Mm-hmm. We're gonna make picks for a couple of teams here, but we're just gonna tell a bunch of bad jokes, and we'll go from there. Speaking of the draft, though, somebody who shouldn't be drafted is Logan Mailloux.
Yeah, we're not experts on the draft, but this we can say with pretty strong authority.
I'm going to say 100% certainty
that this guy shouldn't be drafted. And the sad fact is he probably will be.
Chances
at some point.
Yes.
He's going to take a hit from where he was. He's projected as like a top 45 skater-ish.
Yeah, a lot of people had him in the first round.
Right. But he was convicted in Sweden for essentially revenge porn. There wasn't much of a revenge quality to it. He was trying to demonstrate his sexual exploits to his fellow team, and he distributed a picture of a young woman engaged in a consensual sexual act with him, and then distributed her social media presence and like her official name and photo and stuff. So on his team chat, I guess, or text thread.
Yes. So the sexual act was consensual. However, the taking of the photo and the sharing of the photo was absolutely not consensual.
Right.
I'm not sure about the veracity of this rumor, but the rumor was that some of the guys on the team knew the girl and told her about it, and she was like, "Hell no."
Correct.
Kudos to this young woman for being like, no, I'm not putting up with this shit, and like going to the authorities with it. That's, a remarkable test of fortitude and character and strength and courage. And for this young woman to go through with that, kudos to her.
What's a little ridiculous is the authorities in this case happen to be both his hockey coach and the police commissioner were the same person. And apparently the fines for this type of act in Sweden are relatively cut and dry. He actually pays the victim money, which is kind of novel. To his credit, he has issued what seems to be a heartfelt apology. This does seem along the lines of stupid thing done by horny boys, but it's not cool, and he needs to pay the consequences and, in our opinion, not be drafted. I mean, it's an honor to be drafted, and he should not receive it.
I don't want to speak for Evan, but, in my opinion, he should definitely have to cool his heels somewhere for a couple of years. Like, should this ruin the rest of his life?
And it probably won't.
And it probably won't. But it should put his plans on pause so he can take some time to think about his actions, learn from them, evolve as a person, and become a better man, a more respectful person, truly understand the position that he's put this woman in.
Yeah.
I was reading an article, months ago about how all these porn sites try and do a really good job of scrubbing all of the revenge porn and all of the underage porn and all of these things from their sites, but how it'll be 6 months and then it'll be put these videos will jump back on their website. So it's just this continuous cycle of mental trauma for these victims.
Yeah. And they have to invent automated, complicated digital things to identify these videos and trying to keep them off the site. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this kid doing this could lead to a very traumatic existence for this young woman. And so there's a real severity to this act. We as people can say and can honestly say, this is a stupid, horny young boy. It's also a very humiliating and possibly life-altering moment for this young woman.
Yeah, for sure.
To her credit, she has, come out and said numerous times, this has changed my life. And he needs to understand that. And I really appreciate her response to this situation. And I hope to be able to appreciate the NHL's response to this situation, which is to not draft this kid and let him figure out his life. He's going to be able to play hockey somewhere. That's going to happen. He'll play somewhere. He'll be fine. And
probably for his junior team, the London Knights, because they have unfortunately kind of come out with a response that says, not our problem.
Because we're going to give him all of these resources, and it's or we're making sure he is checking in on all of his possible resources for this.
Yeah, they got a psychologist to profile him to see if he's a predator. And surprise, surprise, horny young kid is not a Jeffrey Dahmer, but this is an incredibly shitty thing to do to a person. And to his discredit, he has used the victim's statements that she wants to sort of destroy his career to try and defend himself in this situation. He's tried to say, oh, she's going above and beyond, when no, she's really just going after what she is entitled to under the law. And, he and the teams that he's played for, neither of which who have suspended him or taken any ice time away from him that we know of.
The Swedish team did come out and say that they played him and kept him under contract in order for him to be able to be prosecuted in Sweden.
Which is really weird when your coach is the police.
Yeah.
It
is true. He could have fled. He could have gone back to Canada and, who knows what extradition or whatever would happen.
No, extradition would not have happened because I think he paid a fine of $5,000.
But they kept him around in an effort to make sure that process happened.
In preparation for going into the NHL, we have fined you $500,000 or $5,000 for doing something terrible. Like, I mean, it's interesting to me that porn sites do more to scrub bad behavior from them than these hockey teams do.
Yeah.
So that's not a great look for either the London Knights or him. And I think realistically, the pushback on this has just started. You know, this story has kind of just eked its way out. I think a lot of the draft Knicks had this on their radar, but now it's started to leak out into the press, and someone will probably draft him at some point, but they're probably going to be under a fair amount of heat if they do it. Also, if they don't do it, because at some point he's going to be a talented prospect that is more of a sure thing than anybody else on your draft board. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting, and I'm kind of prepared to be disappointed to see where he gets drafted.
With that, let's get into the funny bits here. We can't get one fucking episode under our belt without some sort of sexual assault case happening.
We did, and then we called it boring, I think.
Yeah. Anyways, so we're going to just do a quick mock draft, just making some jokes, having some fun. We're going to do picks 1 through 12, one of which is the forfeited Arizona pick that allows Evan to choose a player for Chicago. And if you're lucky, I'll do the 23rd pick for Detroit. Just
I think
to
you
choose
should.
the second Detroit first rounder. Why don't you start off with Buffalo?
So first overall, Buffalo Sabres select Owen Power's hair.
But what about his eyebrows?
I think that counts. Yeah, it's all follicles.
Okay.
He is
Owen
definitely
Power's follicle prowess.
Yeah.
Number one.
He has some of the best flow I have ever seen in an 18-year-old, and he's got eyebrows that your girlfriend will be jealous of. He's an amazing talent at 6'6", very good skater, played really high-level minutes for University of Michigan, played really high minutes playing against men for Team Canada. So, you know, he's probably the closest to a sure thing in this draft, and projects as a very talented defenseman, but he also projects as an absolute beauty with that flow.
Also a sure thing, him getting a Pert Plus sponsorship. Is Pert Plus still a thing?
I don't know. I haven't bought shampoo at Walgreens in a while.
That's fair. So I'll do number 2. The Seattle Kraken with the number 2 pick. I'm going to take William Eklund.
All right.
Number 2 overall. One, I think he's probably the 3rd or 4th most talented guy in the draft, but he has a very definite projected position on left wing, whereas Kent Johnson, who is probably the most skilled guy in the draft, we don't know if he's a winger or a center. So that projection for me is nice. The other thing about it is as a Detroit fan, I like Swedes. So let's bring as many of them to the NHL as possible.
Anaheim, what are their needs like?
I don't know.
You know, Eklund has one of the higher ceilings in the NHL draft this year. Anaheim's got some good young players in Trevor Zegras and Jamie Drysdale. So I'm going to go with a winger to them instead of a center, because there are some really good centers. I'm going to go with Dylan Genther, right wing from Edmonton in the WHL.
The Oil Kings.
Yeah, just good winger. And they have some center depth. They just need some scoring. And I could also see a Luke Hughes go here, but he'll go later.
I wanted the Oil King to go to the Kings. Just so you at one point, he's a very select king. He is an Oil King. However, if he's in LA, he is all of the kings, in which case he assumes all the power. And I think you get an orb of light when you play for the Kings that you just show whenever you need into a very posh LA restaurant or club. And they go, oh, the Kings are here. Actually, you probably can't even get in the door. Andrei Kopitar, they're like, who the fuck are you? Were you a Backstreet Boy?
Andrei Kopitar just doesn't fit in the door either.
Yeah,
he's too big for doors.
They built arched doors to allow Andrei to make it in.
Andrei Kopitar has to retire to Italy because they have arched doors.
So yes, Number 4 is New Jersey. Now, the sexy pick is for Luke Hughes to go here to play with one of his two brothers.
Hughes and Hughes?
I'm not going to do that specifically because let's stretch the family out. I want the Hughes parents to have to pay a boatload for plane tickets to go watch their kids play. By all accounts, they're great people. So like, I'm not trying to disparage them, but I am going to go with Simon Edvinsson.
Okay.
The left-handed defenseman from Sweden. I think that, while Luke Hughes would look pretty in those Devils colors, lining up and getting face-offs from his brother and setting up dimes for his compatriots there in New Jersey, nah. We're going to send him as far away as possible. So Simon Edvinsson goes at 4.
Columbus. What to do about Columbus? As
we learned from their unprotected list, they suck.
I'm going to go with Matt Beniers here because
damn you,
their centers suck and they need one.
If Matt Beniers fell to 5, Columbus would be like Jarmo Kekalainen would be doing backflips. Like that. Yeah, he's Beniers. He played at my alma mater last year. He's one of those great 200-foot centers. He's probably projects as a second 2C, which our former compatriot Rob argues is the most critical position to fill in the NHL. Beniers falling to 5 and falling into Columbus's lap would be just absolutely bonkers.
I mean, he would be a probable maybe replacement for Max Domi eventually. I don't know, because they have center problems.
He would probably be better than Max Domi right out of the box.
For real.
But he has also said that he's highly leaning towards staying in college. So,
as he should. Yeah. Anyone that is drafted by Columbus should stay the fuck away from Columbus until you're really good.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Owen Power should also stay in school for a year. So then, maybe watching Buffalo, maybe he just decides that he's done with hockey and he's just going to get a degree.
Hockey's not for him. He's going to be an engineer.
Yeah. And in that case, he's set up for a good career.
Number 6 is in Detroit. So the easy pick here is Mason McTavish. He's a center, which Detroit needs desperately. He plays in Peterborough, which is where Yzerman played in the OHL. Oh. But what is an Yzerman draft with taking the status quo? We have 2 drafts from him, and in one of them, he took Lucas Raymond, who was, the consensus 4th best player in the league or in the draft. We needed help on the wing. It made sense. But then in the other one, he took Moritz Seider out of fucking nowhere.
and everyone was like, wait, huh? What?
Yeah, and now he's one of the best prospects in the world.
Yeah, Detroit is chomping at the bit to see what he does this year.
He destroyed fools in Sweden last year. He was great at the Worlds this year as well for Germany. And it was a out of left field, balls flapping in the breeze sort of pick. So I'm going to go the same route.
Oh, I'm interested.
I am going to go with Kent Johnson. I said this earlier. Kent Johnson is probably the most skilled player in this draft. Okay. I don't think he's a center. Most draft nicks project him to the wing in the NHL because he's more of a peripheral player. But that skill level is something that the wings do not have.
Gotcha.
And if he puts it all together, he has one of the highest ceilings in this draft. And the wings need a ton of skill. So,
and where is he playing, Jake?
He plays for my alma mater, the University of Michigan. This is basically the University of Michigan draft.
We could have Owen Power currently at Michigan, Beniers currently at Michigan,
Kent Johnson at Michigan, Luke Hughes going to Michigan, Mackie Samasevich, who will probably go later in the first round, also going to Michigan. If Beniers and there's no talk about Johnson going pro, but if Beniers and Owen Power come back next year, that team is going to be unreal talented.
Yeah.
And if they don't win a national title, it'll be actually just a massive disappointment.
So why McTavish or Kent Johnson over the other centers available at?
I don't think Kent Johnson's a center, and I know the Red Wings need a center, but we don't have, maybe with Lucas Raymond, we have one guy who has elite skill on the team or in the prospect pool. I think Kent Johnson brings that as well. And so we just need more of that elite skill and those guys who can, do Datsuki bullshit and just ruin somebody's day.
I love some good Datsuki bullshit.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Kent Johnson at 6.
At 7, San Jose is drafting a 35-year-old from your local beer league roller hockey team who somehow has a contract that's worth $7 million a year.
Yeah, I don't even know if we need to draft anybody for San Jose because he'll immediately be their third best player.
Yeah, we should draft somebody for San Jose, though.
Sure.
I mean, they want a hockey player, don't they?
Who do they want?
Should give him Chaz.
Yeah, I think Chaz is a solid
Chaz
pick.
Lucius. Chaz Lucius. Center, United States Development Program, USHL. My favorite name in the draft. He's Gen Z's Lex Luthor. Is Chaz Lucius.
You mean he's a bad guy in Superman? Like Superman finally kills Lex Luthor and into the void you hear Chaz.
No, he's like reborn as a TikToker.
Is it like
and like
would the gap left in the Superman lexicon then be called a chasm?
He'll do something with kryptonite and like hurt Superman, and then he'll dap on Superman.
Kryptonite and cryptocurrency.
I think his name is awesome.
Right.
That's such a good hockey name, and I hope he can help turn around this tire fire that is San Jose and their old men awful contracts.
Number 8 is LA, and that's where I'm gonna stick Luke Hughes. We got Vancouver, LA, and New Jersey. Have fun, Hughes family. Granted, Vancouver and LA will play each other quite a few times per season, so maybe I should send him to Dallas or something like that. But I think Luke Hughes falling to LA at 8 would be a massive gift. They need defensemen in their prospect pool, which is very forward heavy. And I just think that is an excellent choice for them.
I think it fits awesomely. LA might surprise us all this year or next year. They have a really great farm system, and yeah, as you say, really could use a nice defensive prospect. Luke Hughes was really funny in the media where he was comparing himself to his brothers, and he's like, I'm bigger and I can play penalty kill minutes.
Yeah. It seems like the brothers have gotten more personable as we've gotten through. Like Quinn just looks like he's staring off into space most of the time.
Dude, sad Quinn Hughes is a meme.
Yes.
Like, it's so funny.
Jack seems like relatively, I've listened to some interviews with him where I was like, oh, hey, he seems like a reasonable young man.
Yeah,
Good
he's
job.
also been like super prepared. He was kind of the quote unquote star of the family. Who do you pick to go with Vancouver?
That's you, buddy.
Ooh, going into the deep, because I don't know who any of these other people are, but is Mason McTavish still on the board?
He's still on the board.
All right, I think I'm going to go with Mason McTavish.
That's a good pick.
Yeah, really good, high motor center. Vancouver does need centers. So yeah, I think, that would be a good prospect for them because you can't see both Tyler Mott and Besser sticking around much longer.
We'll see if they even have enough money to re-sign Pettersson.
Yeah, Vancouver's not set themselves up very well moving into free agency.
They're one of those teams with San Jose where I hope Seattle takes somebody with a super low cap hit off of them.
Yeah.
Just to stick it to their new conference rivals.
And just make them...
Don't make it easy on them.
Yeah, make them have to kind of yard sale in a year.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
Oh, it's going to be a tire fire in those two cities, or it already is.
Ottawa.
At number 10, I'm going to take Jesper Wallstedt, the goalie out of Sweden, for Ottawa. They may have just signed their goalie of the current and the future in Matt Murray to a stupid-ass contract, but they need some help. So I'm going to give them Jesper Wallstedt. He has, for the most part, been considered the number one goalie prospect in this class. Sebastian Cossa from Edmonton has kind of snuck up draft boards in the last 3 or 4 months. He had a great season in the WHL, but Jesper has been playing against men in Sweden and put up some pretty shiny numbers. And so I think Ottawa could use somebody like that.
So pick number 11, forfeited, because Arizona is a toxic place to work. So what happens is that this player is picked and then fired on a rocket into the sun.
So this is where Logan Mailloux is drafted.
I mean, somebody's got to be Rocket Man.
That title's already been taken, bro. It's Richard Branson. Can we just like spend 2 seconds on the fact that these people have more money than God and they're spending it to see who can get to space first instead of fixing the problems of our planet?
Yeah, don't they know we have a space force? I mean, Jesus Christ.
Eat shit. Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson and Elon Musk, y'all can go fuck yourselves. I'm over it.
Right. It's not like they're pioneering that much new technology that can help us the way that NASA did.
Yeah.
In all of that kind of public development dollar money that became like Debbie Meyer's green bags and
Tang
and
ballpoint pens.
And most importantly, astronaut ice cream. They're not doing that. They're not giving us astronaut ice cream that you can buy at any museum.
But Richard Branson floated. Oh.
You know, he's the one that I have the least problem with because they've been planning to do that for a really long time.
That might make it worse.
I mean,
go fuck yourself, Richard Branson.
It's dumb. I have a bigger problem with Elon and Jeff Bezos just being like, oh yeah, we're rich, we can do that too.
Yeah.
Whereas Richard Branson's like, I named my company Galactic because I plan to go to space in 1995.
If Jeff Bezos were to come back as a slightly barbecued version of himself.
Can we just not let him back from space?
Can I choose which part of him I get to eat?
I'll take that fried ass dome.
Yeah, it's like a coconut. You gotta smash it open with it. That got dark. All right, who's Chicago taking, Evan?
Chicago's taking the other goalie, Sebastian Casa. I think that's kind of how this is going to work. Is Ottawa's going to take the first goalie and Chicago's going to take the second goalie. And if one of these other teams picks a goalie before them, one or both of them are kind of fucked. Yeah, as you pointed out earlier, he's been playing against some really high level competition in the WHL for Edmonton and, you know, projects as the only other goalie that is first round quality.
All right.
So now we're going to skip 11 picks, all of which are terrible.
Yeah, they won't pan out. They'll be
no chance.
Just I feel bad for them.
We're not skipping over any future Hall of Famers here.
Yeah.
We will never eat our words. And, you know, these aren't even real people.
I am going to go with, I mean, this is obviously such a crapshoot because you never know anything.
I should have left you Chaz Lucius.
No, I'm going to go with Daniil Chayka from Guelph in the OHL.
Is that Megan Chayka's brother?
Maybe. I'm guessing no. He's a big defenseman. We need some left-handed defensemen on the roster. He's, you know, still expected to be there somewhere in that 22 range or technically 23 range.
How big is he?
He's 6'3". He's big. He's a good skater. And the Red Wings need some defensive prospects because, I mean, they've taken a lot of guys who are projections and who have a ton of potential upside, but there's some work to be done with them.
Yeah, and I sent Beniers to Columbus, but Detroit would love to have him.
Oh, there's no way he makes it to 6, but if he did, yeah, that he would be the pick in a heartbeat for sure.
And I mean, you think that Detroit wouldn't take Luke Hughes?
No, I wanted Luke Hughes to go to LA so I could make jokes. No, I took Kent Johnson at 6, and I still think that's a good choice for the Wings if he's available, but who knows?
The game of this first round, at least for me, is like, where does Luke Hughes go? Where does Beniers go? Who picks a goalie first? And then where does that second goalie land?
This episode is very long, and so in the interest of my ability to edit it relatively quickly, we're going to sign off here. Before we go, you can find us anywhere on the internet. HandsomeHockey.com is our website. Handsome Hockey Podcast on Instagram, at Handsome Hockey on Twitter, or you can email us handsomehockeypod@gmail.com. Finally, you can find us on our Handsome Hockey Facebook page where we post our episodes and memes and other stupid degenerate shit.
In terms of like difficulty level of the sign off stuff, you're definitely like the 1C here. You take on the most difficult part with all the ats and the long words and stuff. I just tell you where to find the podcast. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, OnlyFans, Stitcher, TuneIn, Overcast, Red Circle, and YouTube.
Thank you, as always, for listening. If you are on one of the services that allows for ratings, please give us a 5-star rating. That would be
I am
really
once again asking you to rate my podcast.
If you can follow our podcast, that would be excellent as well. Thanks, everybody, for all your time, and we really appreciate you. Stay handsome, everybody.
Restez beau, tout le monde.